Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. I'm so pleased to have as our special guest today, Mr. Larry Rubin, President and Chairman of the Board of the American Society of Mexico, an organization that for the past 80 years has represented the American community and U.S. interests in our neighbor to the south. Larry's extensive experience in business and government relations, along with his deep understanding of the cultural, political, and commercial connections between our two countries, inform and facilitate his leadership of the organization and advancement of its goals. He is actively involved in the public life of Mexico, appearing frequently on the front pages of newspapers, and is invited regularly to speak on radio and television programs. He contributes columns for the Reforma newspaper, CNN Expansion, and Forbes. For over 15 years, he has played an important role in supporting the initiatives, legislation, and regulations that benefit American investors and U.S.-Mexico relations, and conversely, in resisting the actions that negatively affect the relationship between the two countries. He is today one of the most influential opinion leaders in topics related to the hugely important bilateral relationship that impacts hundreds of millions of people on both sides of our borders and beyond. For the past 2 decades, Larry has served on the boards of various North American companies in Mexico. From 1997 to 2008, he was a member of the board of directors of the American Chamber of Commerce of Mexico, becoming its youngest CEO. And among the highlights of Larry's long list of professional and personal achievements is his successful effort in 2005 to bring together the 3 presidential candidates at the time, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, Roberto Madrazo, and Felipe Calderón, a feat that is yet to be repeated. Larry, thanks so much for being here. It was such a pleasure meeting you a few months ago at the graduation ceremonies of our Mexico City campus, hearing your terrific keynote presentation, and of course, speaking with you and comparing notes about our similar bicultural upbringings, a Mexican mother and American father growing up in Mexico City and inevitably loving both cultures in all their complexities. Thank you, Larry, for being here.
On the contrary, thank you, Rafael, and it's great just to be able to share with you and with those listening in a little bit about our shared background. And Texas, of course, is a border state with Mexico, but it also makes us in Texas and in Mexico so bicultural. And San Antonio, of course, is a great example of biculturality.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. Well, to get our conversation, going, I want to ask you about that. I want to ask you about that bicultural upbringing, and it's a 2-part question, Larry. First of all, how important was that bicultural upbringing to your professional success? And the second part is how central was that bicultural upbringing to your personal identity, how you see yourself, who you are, and the life you live outside of work with family and intimate friends?
Definitely. Well, in terms of my professional background, I think it's been very useful because at the end of the day, I think in both tracks, right? Both the Mexican way and also the American way. So it gives me an opportunity to really relate to Americans and Mexicans in the same way, because I am both, right? I'm Mexican and American. And it's not that it's half and half, because half would mean you don't have the other part, right? And at the end of the day, I really find this biculturalism very interesting because I'm not half, I'm completely Mexican and I'm completely American. So I'm able to navigate both countries. And at the end of the day, the trading relationship between our two countries is so big that you have to, at least in Mexico, you have to have that American component to be able to have the other party also engaged and understanding of the relationship between both countries. So in terms of professional, it's been really helpful for me, and that's how I got from being a baggage agent at 18 to becoming the country manager for American Airlines at 24, right? 6 years later. And it was really like a Horatio Algiers story. I learned everything I did from American self-help books, and those were amazing for my beginning in the airline world. And becoming the country manager at 24 for Mexico was awesome. But it really proved the fact that being bicultural is so beneficial for those of us that have this unique trait. And in terms of the personal aspect of it, Rafael, I think it's really interesting. I've lived in both countries. I lived in Houston, and I've lived in Mexico City. And what I have found is that that living in the States or living in Mexico, really being bicultural is a gift. And unfortunately, not every binational citizen sees it this way. Sometimes they feel that they're not from the States, or they're not from Mexico, right? And what I'd love to do is really help people understand that it's not that you're not from here or there. Actually, you're both. You have the great benefit of being Mexican and being American, and having both roots and values and culture. So it's exciting. And there's 38 million Mexican Americans today in the US, right? That are basically 12% of the population. So it's a huge part of the American fabric. So I just love being able to be an ambassador for both cultures.
You know, so much of what you say, of course, it resonates with me so much, because we do have a remarkably similar we have remarkably similar elements in our upbringing. But today's not the day to talk about me. We'll leave that for another conversation. You know, you talk about the many millions of Mexicans in the U.S. and you know, Texas is and you mentioned it earlier. You know, it's one of the large homes to this mass of humanity. And speaking of Texas and great universities, in addition to the University of the Incarnate Word is Rice. I know fairly recently you became a Rice owl. And you know, my loyalties are with another flock of birds, the mighty UIW Cardinals, of course. But I do love Rice. One reason being that my son John graduated from Rice and played baseball there for 4 years. And what a terrific school. I always knew Rice was great, but then, you know, going to watch my son play baseball and being involved as a father of, you know, I got to know a little bit more. And you know, I commend you for your choice of school for your MBA, and for choosing a university in the great state of Texas, which, you know, is so important to that bilateral relationship between U.S. and Mexico. It's hard to say anything comprehensive about that relationship without bringing up the great state of Texas. So tell us a little bit about your experience at Rice, first of all, in Texas, and was the location in Texas, did that have anything to do with your choice of school for that MBA?
Well, thanks. That's a great question. I love Rice, and it was a fantastic experience for me. I was able to basically learn and be with amazing people in my class, 60 actually, and as we graduated, I was distinguished with the MA Wright Award, which basically is a selection by the members of my graduating class for modeling leadership, exemplary service, and making significant contributions to the university. And honestly, I mean, I was just doing what I always do, which is serve. I love to serve. So I was connecting my fellow cohorts to other executives and leaders, and just bringing additional value to everyone. And it was a great experience. Rice is a fantastic university. But you know what I found, and this is what is astonishing to me, is we're 60 people in my particular class, and I was the only Mexican American in that particular class, and the class above me and the class below me. Just it's interesting, because it tells you that even though we're about 15% of the total population of Texas and of Houston, why was I the only one, right? And that's when I start saying we need to do something to make other Mexican Americans want to graduate from MBAs or just go on to a different level, and that's been something I've been working with, just to see how we can connect and really help this fantastic population grow even further. But Rice, as you know, is the #1 entrepreneurial school in the States, and I learned a lot. Of course, Incarnate Word is also a fantastic university, and I love the fact that you have campuses both in Mexico and in the US. And it just shows that really that diversity in having thought leaders from both countries. And so, although I'm an owl, of course, Cardinals are close.
Yeah, well, and the Cardinals, the UIW is a really special place, and there's elements that really make us unique and give us an edge. And you and I met at our Mexico City campus. Mexico, it's such a part of who we are, and also just Mexican American, specifically Mexican American students. We have. We're 52% Hispanic, and most of those Hispanic students are Mexican American. I want to ask you about that a little bit later, because I really think it's worth underlining, and also for our audience and our students, just how important that is. Sometimes it's hard for you to look at yourself and you just take things for granted, but our students need to recognize, like, you're privileged to be Mexican American and to be studying at UIW, and it helps prepare you for a demographic that more and more the people with that bicultural and specifically Mexican and American in the United States are going to have a little bit of an edge. You mentioned earlier, Larry, about of course your journey with the airlines, and what a tremendous the Horatio Alger story, for going from baggage handler to the executive leadership ranks of an international airline. Started as U.S. Airways, then became American Airlines. Of course, I mean, it really is. I mean, it's an amazing story, and then that your life is, as all of our lives, it's a journey. And your upbringing with your parents, and then this incredible ascent with the airlines helped you prepare for your leadership with the American Society of Mexico, and to navigate the complexities of that position. To me, it's almost obvious. But could you tell us a little bit more about your work at the American Society of Mexico, the opportunities and challenges that you're focusing on right now as president and chairman of the board?
Definitely, Rafael. And the American Society was founded 81 years ago by then U.S. Ambassador to Mexico, Ambassador Messersmith, and just with the idea of having an umbrella organization that would represent this very important relationship in Mexico. He obviously was a visionary, and I'm not sure he saw that our two countries would have a trading agreement a few decades later. But really, what he did create was this fantastic organization that represents business, represents American NGOs, and naturally represents the U.S., the 2 million U.S. citizens living in Mexico. And for me, it's been just an awesome opportunity to be able to represent who I am, right? Mexico and the US together, and this amazing trade relationship of almost $700 billion, which makes Mexico the largest trading partner for the US, and vice versa for Mexico. US is the largest trading partner, and really being in the middle of it, and being able to help business, help American NGOs, of course, and help the US citizens living in Mexico has been both rewarding and challenging, because of course they're two very different countries. Each one has different politics and different policies and different ideas, different congresses. So constantly we're having to advocate in Mexico in particular for US corporations, and basically just for business itself. We always look for opportunities that are win-win, that are beneficial for Mexico and beneficial for the US, but we're not afraid to speak up. And many times I have to speak up and say things that make politicians uncomfortable, both in Mexico and the US, in a nonpartisan way, of course, but always looking to benefit both countries. And fortunately, so far, we've been very successful in having policy changes in both countries that benefit basically both Mexico and the U.S. and companies, and also bring light to issues that are important to have in front of the general public. So the American Society has been a great opportunity to make sure that the relationship is safeguarded, because of course governments will do what they need to do, but at the end of the day, it's not governments who run business, it's not governments who do the daily activities that we do, or bring all this civic work that citizens do amongst themselves. It's basically citizens and private corporations and public corporations really coming in the forward of this relationship, and that's why I've been so excited for the last few years of being able to be that voice for Americans in Mexico, but also be that voice in Washington, that we're telling our politicians in DC how we see the relationship and how valuable it is. So I've had the opportunity of being part of that negotiating table at the USMCA when that happened a few years ago, and of course also helping politicians in Mexico and the US understand each other, because being Mexican American, of course, I have both chips, right? And I'm able to understand how Mexicans think, but I also have an ability to understand how Americans think, because I'm both. So that's been really useful. And as I said before, just being able to serve and being able to contribute is awesome. And there's something that we're also doing in the States, Rafael, and I wanted to shed light on it, is we've created the Mexican American Society out of Texas, although it's a national organization, and basically it's to serve Mexican Americans in the States, these 38 million Americans with Mexican ascendancy, and plus you have 10 million Mexican legal residents, and then of course a slew of undocumented. But here we're talking about those Americans that have a U.S. passport or a U.S. citizenship. They not all have passports, but at the end of the day, they're citizens. And how can we also bring further recognition to what Mexican Americans contribute in the U.S.? So we've been busy on both sides of the border.
It's great, Larry. It's great work. And you mentioned the businesses, they play such an important role, and they're the ones that kind of go out and get things done. And I love bringing the perspective of businessmen and women, individuals involved in the world of commerce. Particularly for me, I grew up as a child in Mexico City, but my family, my culture is from the frontera, from the border to Coahuila. And I've lived in the southwestern United States all my life, so I've been around the border, and seeing the commerce, the back and forth, and then here in my role as director of the Lewis Center, I have the privilege of engaging with people in the business community, and ones that who are South Texas business leaders, and the approach that they take to the relationship with Mexico is so practical. There's an outcome. It's like what works for good business, for good relations with the people. There's going to be, like you said, a win-win. It's sometimes the political rhetoric sometimes I scratch my head, and I think sometimes things are said to try to get people excited, and sometimes the wrong negative type of excitement. For example, on the topic of immigration, it's like, I think sometimes politicians trying to get elected, trying to get their base excited, saying negative things about immigrants. Business people quite often have a much different take, and looking at it as opportunities. It's the world. I mean, here in South Texas, we've lived with immigrants, people coming in, and Mexicans who have been here for generations, right? That's part of Texas history, and it's part of Texas business history is not missing the opportunities that Mexico represents to us. But of course, your work with the American Society of Mexico, Larry, it's not all you do. You in addition to that, you're also a managing partner in Latin America for Odgers Berndsen, right? A leading worldwide executive search firm. And I'm curious to know a little bit about that, Larry. And that brings us back a little bit to UIW. Is when you work with companies who are looking for executives to lead their companies, to be leaders, how much do companies value a candidate's ability to work with and understand cultural differences? Is that something that you see that companies are valuing and asking you to find people who have that skill?
Yeah, definitely, and it's so very important as a great author, Thomas Friedman, had said at one point. It's basically there's no borders any longer, right? And the world is very much a flat world because we're able to connect in seconds to somebody else, and it might be in the other part of the world, in another continent, where it might be at night or it might be daylight, totally opposite to where you're at, and when you're able to navigate and understand different cultures, it gives you an edge. And as a search executive myself, right, that I've been doing this for over 10 years. What we look for when we're placing executives in different Fortune 500s is always that executive that can connect with others and necessarily others in other parts of the world, right? Because at the end of the day, executives at a higher level need to communicate with people from different nationalities that think differently. And of course, just in America alone, there's a tremendous diversity in thought, diversity in ways of living, and the more you understand different cultures, the better you're prepared to just be able to talk to different people than yourself, right? And I find that so very interesting, learning different cultures, learning different languages, and speaking to people that are different from me and think differently from me, right? And I might have a certain way of thinking, but I'm always open to listening and hearing other people, and sometimes changing my mind. Sometimes I don't, right? Or sometimes it reaffirms what I think. But that's the value of really embracing diversity, inclusion, and different cultures, and really when you're able to understand and learn from different cultures, that's when you become an even more valuable executive and a more valuable, basically functioning person of society. And what I like about UIW is it gives you that opportunity to live in Mexico, understand a different culture, go to the school there, be it in Guanajuato or Mexico City. But again, for those students living in Mexico, they also have that great opportunity of going up to San Antonio, which is a super friendly city. It couldn't have been a better city for Mexicans to go. As you know, San Antonio is second home to many hundreds of thousands of Mexicans, because they just love the warmth of people in San Antonio. They love just the culture, the particular culture, the Texan atmosphere. It's just a great place to live, San Antonio is, and Texas in general. So I think that the more you can understand other people and you're able to communicate to other people in different ways, the better executive you are. So definitely, even if you do not have the opportunity of being Mexican American, just learning and living in a different culture will give you definitely a great perspective on life, on how to work and relate to other individuals.
Your message is so important, Larry, for our audience and our student audience, particularly, to hear that. a couple of things just in response. I mean, you mentioned our campuses and kind of, borders kind of disappearing in today's society. And for us at UIW as our, an international system, right, with campuses in San Antonio, Mexico City, Irapuato, sometimes those borders are like not there, and for me, maybe it's an exaggerated case because, I work closely with our Mexico campuses. So I get to travel, of course, to the campuses regularly, but our two rectores right now are actually right here on our campus now with a group of directors from high schools in their respective areas in Mexico. So that flow and communication is really strong, and the border is just not felt. That border doesn't divide us. But the message to the students, what you say, companies value students and candidates, upcoming leaders who are able to enjoy people of other cultures, who are able to communicate with people of other cultures. And our students, here in San Antonio, this is where I'm based in San Antonio, of course. And, whether you're Hispanic or not on our campus, our campus is super diverse, and just walking around campus, your classes, you are just, there's diversity all around you. And our students need to understand this is an edge that they have graduating. And I think really, really important to hear it from someone like you who is involved in the day-to-day of helping companies identify these candidates, and for our students to know, okay, companies are looking for people like me who have these skills that I may not even know that I have, and they need to be able to state it with confidence that they do have this ability, and that their college education help them have it, help them have that as well. Mexico City, San Antonio, it is I feel like we're so close, but it is different. Mexico City, and I love going back to Mexico City. Just what an amazing place it is. What an amazing city. Somehow I feel like it's like things are looking better in Mexico City than they have. I don't, the pollution, maybe I've been lucky, but the last 2 or 3 times I've visited, I've had clear air. There seems less vehicles. The regulations they've put in to control the vehicular traffic, I think it's having an impact. But I love being in Mexico City. And I do want to ask you a little bit about that. I'm just, what's your take? Your take as someone who's very international. You have your finger on the pulse of many different cities, but of course you live in Mexico City. What is your take on the state of affairs in the great Mexican capital right now? And also, if you could tell this trend of young American professionals moving to Mexico City as just finding a great place to live. And then today's world of being able to work remotely, some of them, they still have their employment in the United States, but working from Mexico City. I've read a couple of articles on that recently. So my question is just, give me your take on just Mexico City right now. What's it like? And do you notice this trend of Americans moving to Mexico City?
Definitely, it's just part of this biculturality that we have between Mexico and the U.S. is so very interesting. Americans feel very comfortable living in Mexico. Mexicans are very friendly to Americans and just basically to tourists. But Americans are very well understood in Mexico because our countries have so many similarities and so many synergies that thanks to the trade agreement that we've had for the last since 1993, so now going on to 20 years, it's been an amazing 30 years, right? It's going on to 30 years it's an amazing tool that has helped us bridge many gaps between our two countries. Mexico City, as you know, Rafael, and those that are hearing us, if they haven't been to Mexico City, is an amazing metropolis of, yes, 20 and some million people, but at the end of the day, you don't feel it because it's a big city, but you have tons of culture. So you can go to the pyramids and also be at a skyscraper the same day, right? And the pyramids that are 1,000-year olds, and just amazing findings in terms of culture. The museums are awesome. Mexico City has so many museums, but also it's a huge city with a lot of buildings. But in the middle of all these buildings, there's a huge park that I think is like 3 times what Central Park is. So it's just an amazing. Chapultepec Park is an amazing park to walk in and go to the lake and visit the castle there that was built in the 19th century with French and European accents. And also, I mean, diversity in food is awesome. I've had a Korean, but I've also had Indian, and of course a lot of Mexican food, a lot of hot sauces to choose from, and tacos, and now what's coming to Mexico, which is new, is Mexicans are getting a flavor of Tex-Mex food, which was not popular before, but now you're seeing it with the younger generations. They definitely understand it's not Mexican, but they want to try it out, and I'm shooting that someday we'll have Taco Bell in Mexico, because I love the Doritos tacos. So eating a taco made of Doritos is just fantastic. And I hope that they bring that to Mexico. I'm sure that one would be popular. And really, these two cultures are amazing. And living in San Antonio, I mean, I've visited San Antonio so many times because my childhood friends would have homes in San Antonio. And it's really an amazing city that when you visit San Antonio, it gives you a different feeling. It's a smaller city, but at the end of the day, it's so inviting. And I think that's what you get in both cities. They're inviting cities. That's why we get so many Mexicans wanting to live in San Antonio, and so many Americans wanting to live in Mexico. There's an area in a neighborhood in Mexico City called Condesa that the other day I walked by it, and what I was trying to find was somebody that would speak Spanish, not English, right? And it's just amazing to see how many Americans are living now in Mexico City. But when you walk to in downtown San Antonio, you'll find the same thing. It's full of Mexicans living in the States. So that's a commonality that we're finding more and more between our two countries.
We have a visiting professor from the UNAM, from UNAM Mexico City here at UIW. He decided to do his sabbatical here with us, and he's blown away by the San Antonio cultural experience of the Mexicanness of our city, and it's only increasing, and it's interesting. It's not just, you see the superficial part of it, of course. You go to the Riverwalk and, mariachi and during holidays, the beautiful dresses and so forth. But this is not, of course, as you know, this is not just superficial. Like, this is at our core. We have that biculturality. So coming around full circle to where we started, that's who you are, Larry. That's who I am. That's how we grew up, and I love it. It makes my life so rich, and I know it makes your life so rich. And I congratulate you for the success that you've had. I thank you for the great work that you're doing with the American Society. There's always the need for that, and right now, we're coming up on another presidential transition, and so there's going to be, of course, as you know better than anyone, there's going to be another absolute need for you guys to step up. So thank you.
That's so true.
Larry.
And the interesting thing, Rafael, just to finalize, is we're having elections in both countries, presidential elections, right? So yes, the rhetoric is going to get tough, I'm sure. I mean, I've started to see it already in international publications, including The Economist, that in a whole page described how, and the title basically said how Mexico is becoming the new enemy of the United States, right? So, so we have to work hard against that, because at the end of the day, we're not just friends between Mexico and the U.S. We're really we're siblings, right? We're brothers and
No
sisters,
doubt.
and we need to make sure politicians understand that and don't use our differences against us, right? And that's why people like you and I and other binationals really can do a great difference in this relationship and making sure that our two countries become further closer than further apart.
And you think about just, kind of putting it in a global context, that proximity that proximity that we have to each other, and the advantages of nearshoring, and with the attention to the environment, and the cost to our earth of having to engage in trade more with countries that are so far away, and that needs to continue, but to take advantages of the countries that are at your doorstep. What advantages that brings to us, and I don't want to underline too much just the economic benefits. Of course, there's we share cultures, we share societies, we share an environment and a physical territory, but the economic piece of it is absolutely. We can't ignore that. But yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, for some of our listeners who may not know, of course, the elections in Mexico are every 6 years, in the US they're every 4. Every now and then they come together, and it's in the same year. And we have that coming up. So it'll be I will be following even more closely than I usually do. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Larry. But Larry, thanks again. You have so many things going that, giving time to our interview series. I know you love to serve, and I know you're doing this out of because of that inclination to always help. And you're a great friend to the University Incarnate Word. Really appreciate you being my friend and supporting the initiatives of the Lewis Center, and keep doing the work that you're doing. And I look forward to staying in touch, of course, in the coming years.
Definitely, and I hope to visit San Antonio very very soon, and seeing you and really meeting other students there at UIW. That'd be awesome. So for sure, in 2024, sometime earlier in the year, I'll make it a point to visit beautiful San Antonio and your great campus.
We will take good care of you here, my friend, and have a great Thanksgiving. This interview will play for weeks ahead, but right now we're recording it in 2 days before Thanksgiving. So I'm sure with your bicultural upbringing, there's going to be something having to do with Thanksgiving there in Mexico City, El Día de Acción de Gracias.
I always spend Thanksgiving in somewhere in the States. So I'm here in Chicago, another very Mexican Mexican looking city, and my sister lives here. So the family, my kids, everyone's here celebrating Thanksgiving.
Terrific. Well, enjoy it, Larry, and I'll be in touch soon. Thanks again.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rafael, and thank you, UIW.